Thank you for that wonderful introduction. First, I would like to thank Claire and Mick, because without them, you would not be listening to me, and I hope to convey the voice, at least a voice, of working class Georgians that probably have never been ever represented in these halls. I would like to say how Mick and Claire kept being like, no, these are a perspective, which they have done more than a lot of MEPs that will pick these most elite Georgians and say, this is the perspective of Georgians everywhere. So from the beginning, like, this is more honest than anything you're getting other places. I'm also kind of upset that the European Parliament has become a space where Georgian domestic politics is fought in. And this really bothers me because this is a struggle within the elites. They're all rich, wealthy people, and they do not represent most of us in Georgia, okay, who are working class, who are poor, many of them leaving to work somewhere else just to survive and pretty much giving up their lives, hoping the next generation may have a chance. So from the beginning, this space has been only occupied by a war between different elites. So to have even anything that I'm going to say here, to be here, for me is something very special, and I hope that other workers can see this. So let's talk about the labor conditions in Georgia, which many of you may not know. Here's what we don't have, and I will start with these stark facts. There is no minimum wage in Georgia. The wages are so low that, according to one study we did with nurses, 95% have to take out a loan just to be able to pay for basic goods. Labor inspection only recently, I'm talking about last couple of years, had the power to even check for health and safety and for labor code. Insane wage theft. We started, there's something called Fair Labor platform that started people who actually just talk about, write in about them, what they think they're getting, not getting as far as wages. So it's not like done in a, big database that the government is doing, but we're sort of doing it like ad hoc. And the wage theft are in millions and millions of dollars, self-reporting. There's no overtime pay. Like, we don't know what no overtime pay is. It just says it has to be more than the regular pay, but what does that mean? So it could be not even 1 cent, 1/3 of a cent. There's no unemployment insurance. There's no maternity pay. The pension is ridiculous. Pension is supposed to be wages after you retire. It is beyond low. They call it subsistence minimum, but it is not. I don't know for who this is subsistence, like for ants maybe. There's very little social safety net, and occupational medicine, like as an able to track occupational diseases, traumas, things like that, it doesn't exist. It was completely gotten rid of. So when during the Soviet Union, it used to be about 200 to 300 diagnoses of occupational diseases, today it is 0. No one knows how people are getting sick at all, what it's for, where you're getting, because due to what. And of course we have industry, very few industry left, but very dangerous industry like coal, manganese, copper, that cause occupational diseases which are untreated. And it falls on the families to take care of them. And then when they cannot pay the healthcare bills, the women in the family have to migrate to Italy or elsewhere to pay for the family and for the hospital bills. So it is completely privatized, the cost of these, I wouldn't say neoliberal, it's worse than neoliberal. It's like savage capitalism. And a company can come in, and there's been every kind of company, Turkish, Irish, whatever, Russian, they come in, they set up a store, they get all these like help from the government, one-stop shop. We're really friendly for, with business. And then they don't pay wages to the workers that have been working there for months. And they can just take off and leave the country. And we've had many cases of that. And there's nothing we can do about it. That's there's no laws to protect it. So why is all this happening? Since the last 30 years, when we did a study, we sort of divided up the post-Soviet phase of Georgia into 3 parts. First part was complete breakdown. So there was already some privatization, but it didn't go far enough. It was like beginning of sort of no neoliberal reforms. IMF, World Bank were just coming in. Though I would say the appetite in post-Soviet world is actually worse than the IMF and the World Bank. Like they will do more radical reforms than even necessary by the IMF or World Bank, because they are in such competition for each other's, trying to get that capital, that FDI to come into their country. They're willing to reduce everything to the lowest level to attract it. And of course, Georgia's so far away, it's not really attracting that much FDI. They just keep cutting all these, social programs and so on. So then during Saakashvili's period, it was very militant, as everybody has also talked about, is in order to establish neoliberalism, and we know this through Chile, in the beginning you have to have a lot of violence because people do act up against all these kinds of, austerity, centralization, helping financial organizations develop at the cost of social, reduction of workforces, privatization, making what used to be universities for free. Now you have to pay a lot of money, healthcare privatized, and so on. So this is something that, and along with the degraded culture that we had where overnight a state collapsed. If you can imagine, my brother was also a victim where he was shot 2 times because there were kids that was running around with guns. And this was the 90s. So in 2000, they had to also clean up so-called crime, which means that they also locked everyone up. And one of my favorite Eduardo Galeano quotes is, people were in jail so the prices can be free. And that's sort of what happened with Georgia. Then Georgian Dream came in, and in 2013, the labor code was written anew. During this militant neoliberalism, there was no more labor code, there was no more occupational health and safety, and so on. And on we can list of all the things that were gone overnight. They were like, it was deemed corrupt, and it was anti-corruption, so that means that nothing ever happened again. So there was no more occupational diseases. That's how they, if there's no organizations, there's no corruption. If there's no state, there's no corruption, right? And so the labor code was rewritten once more, but of course it was incredibly weak. If you think about class struggle, if the labor code was an example of class struggle, you would see the class struggle is very low. The working class does not have much power. That is one of the worst labor codes ever. Through time, there were supposedly more, changes to the labor code with EU directives and certain, association agreement that we have. It's been really just drops and drops and drops. Where it really matters about raising wages has never happened. Overtime pay, maternity pay, whenever the business has to pay, they have not taken any of that into law. What they have changed is like now the business has to give you a paper slip. These are the kind of changes they make and call it labor reform, okay? Nothing about real things. But the last 2 years, one thing I'll say, because we're a healthcare union as well, is that there's been a minimum wage for nurses and doctors, and that was also brought because the working class we've been working nonstop to try to get those changes. And because I have to finish, I'll say, I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. Georgian workers were the front line in 1890s to 1900s. Europe should be thanking Georgian workers and workers in Georgia who've been a front line of class struggle for, health and safety to ending child workers and so on. And so we have a lot to give and a lot to actually look back on our history and to be proud of. So there's this thing where it's like Europe is the only thing that's teaching us how to have labor code, and it's just not true. So with EU or without EU, the workers will have their say, they will have their day, and we will build better Georgia with or without anyone's help. Thank you.